All right, welcome back to Professor of Genius. This is the Mr. Mac podcast, and we've been talking a lot about some of these iOS features. You might have caught our YouTube feed last couple of weeks going over specifically why you should love the Photos app again. Because iOS 18 brought some significant changes to the Photos app, and it's a little bit different, but we made the case. This is a YouTube video. Go back and listen if you missed it. But the fundamental process is maybe the way that Apple has designed the new Photos app is awesome, and the reason we might not like it is just because there is an aversion to change. Okay, we might just have a confirmation bias that is not being taken care of as we look at the Photos app. And could we have the same experience with the Mail app? We're going to talk more about that right after this. Cue the music. All right, Apple Mail. Yes, it's so essential to the experience on the iPhone, and I don't know if it ever needed to be that way. It's such an essential experience on the iPhone, and for those of you who may not know, such an essential experience for the technician community. If you're a technician, if you're a genius, you have definitely spent, if we were to put a percentage on it, what do you think? 40%? 50% of the calls and the help and support that you give to your loving and beloved customers is to that Mail app, because it is one that needs to handle so much, whether it's Yahoo or AOL, iCloud or Gmail. It's got to work with all of them, all these other major companies that change things all the time along with Apple. And it was something that was so essential to understanding in the tech repair space that we would actually assign this. And by we, I mean me. When we would get a new customer coming in, whenever we had a new employee sit down, he brought a resume, and I would take an iPhone and I would set up the Mail app on it with probably the business account. And I would set up the Mail app on it with one of the store accounts, and I would break it. I would prepare for the interview. Most people prepare for interviews, getting their list of questions and like maybe thinking through some of the Q&A. I'm over there, I'm on the iPhone, getting the mail up and then just breaking it. And you might say, how did you do that? There's a few ways you can do it. You can change the ports on some accounts. It depends on the service that you're doing. But if the ports are wrong, the password is wrong, sometimes you can go and type in the wrong password while the account is already set up, and that'll break both incoming and outgoing. But if you want to be more sophisticated, you can break just one of the servers. It's called the SMTP server, which is basically the outgoing emails. So they may test it and be like, I don't know, this is getting emails. That means the IMAP, or the incoming mail server, still works, but you got to do a circular test. And there was a fun way for me to immediately assess someone's knowledge of something as important and as ubiquitous as mail. So as Apple brings in this new Mail app into iOS 18.2, we have a whole slew of new challenges for tech support agents. What does it mean to you, the customer? Of course, if you've seen it, just show up and just ruin your afternoon, because you now have 4 categories. You got primary, transactions, updates, promotions, and the goal, according to Apple, is to help users find and manage their emails more efficiently. So that's definitely a thumbs up. And maybe we can go ahead and take this moment right now to say Gmail has been doing this for years. And I will talk about my special relationship with that Gmail feature in a few minutes. But first, before we get to someone who maybe is biased like me, let's talk about the fact that not all users have embraced these changes wholeheartedly, right? With some people saying that the new categories are cluttered, it's harder to find specific messages. And I think the most common comment, something similar to what we see with the Photos conversation that we just had, which is, it was fine. It was fine. I loved it. Why did you break this, Apple? It was perfect. But remember, this is the Professor of Genius podcast. So we are suggesting that some real life geniuses, not just by title, but by actual IQ, went through this thing and decided this is the right thing to do. So we want to make sure that when we're proclaiming it was fine, it was perfect, we're not just proclaiming I was used to it. So whether you're a fan of the new system or longing for the simplicity of the past, we got you covered right here. We're going to dive into the first topic, which is to go way back before iCloud, back before iPhone, all the way back to the year 2000. Apple is supporting its suite of software, which software was pretty limited for the Apple ecosystem at this point. You really had to go through Apple to get to most of the programs that were going to run at this time on your Mac. Certainly with any level of ease. And that suite originally was called iTools. Even if you don't specifically remember what that was in, iTools probably gives it away. It had an app for your email. It had an app for what was called iDesk, some simple word processing programs. And then that, along with a service called .Mac, basically gave you this suite that allowed you to do your basic programs and services on your computer. And at that point, if you went and got an email from Apple, you had, and some of you guys still have this, kudos if you do. I don't, I'm jealous all the time when I see someone who has steve@mac.com. Right, at mac.com. And we may remember that actually changed at a certain point because some of you have at mac.com. And then in 2008, you were handed a second email address that goes to the same email account, because in 2008, we had this new product that had come out the summer before. In July of 2007, the iPhone is announced, and Apple is now in this situation where they have to give a more, not only comprehensive experience to their Apple ecosystem and the people who already have a Mac and who are picking up iPhones, but also there's this huge competitor that is just crushing it when it comes to communication and productivity. And it is Microsoft's Outlook, Microsoft Exchange. That's right. That is the gold standard across all. I always say this all the time. People are like, Apple only has 10%. It might be like 14% now of the computer market share. It seems like everyone I know has a Mac. Yes, but remember, we have massive companies. We got not just computer companies like IBM, but whole companies, insurance companies, State Farm, all of these massive companies, Amazon, run on PC. And then not only the companies, but the government. It's a pretty big market for running any sort of operating system, except the marketing department inside of the government. They're going to maybe be running on the one Mac in the whole 30,000 employee building. Is going to be the guy putting together the desktop publishing flyers. But if you weren't that guy, you had a PC and you were using Outlook to communicate and set your calendar and build tasks. So we had the invention and the release of Mobile Me, which had something that was supposed to compete with Exchange, especially when it came to mail. You were able to, at least according to the announcement, put your regular email address, especially if it was a Microsoft email address, out of Outlook, out of Microsoft Exchange, into the Mobile Me and iPhone app. Did not go well. Almost immediately, the reviews are very poor against Mobile Me. I think it was all really captured by an article in the Wall Street Journal by Guy Mossberg, who titled his article, "Apple's Mobile Me is Far Too Flawed to Be Reliable." And there are a few famous tirades from Steve Jobs. This is maybe the biggest one. He got the whole team together reportedly, or according to legend or lore, but there are some direct quotes where he said he sat his team down who built Mobile Me, and he said, "Hey, what is Mobile Me supposed to do?" He let them answer him. No matter what they said, I'm going to go ahead and guess he had the next statement prepared. And he said, "Then why the heck doesn't it do that?" And I'm adding heck there to cover a likely Steve Jobs explicit term. We have Mobile Me. We have a bunch of new email addresses and clients that are at me.com. Now you can email people to two different emails completely. They disband that entire team. Eddie Q comes in, who is a rising star in the Apple employee line. And Eddie Q is now the senior vice president of services, and he basically fixes it. It takes a while to roll out. Okay, this was in 2008. They basically made it a year, and then at this point they're now working on what we all know and love is iCloud. And this was something that Steve Jobs was on top of and apparently anticipated skepticism, because he said, as iCloud's famous phrase that we all love about Apple products in general is, it just works. And then he asked rhetorically, why should I believe them? They're the ones that brought me Mobile Me, them being Apple. So the good news is it was released alongside of iOS 5 and the iPhone 4S. And at this point, we started getting not only a third and new email address at iCloud.com, but also a product that was starting to be very stable, very reliable, and worked well with third parties. This was a big victory for Apple and the Steve Jobs team, because Steve Jobs from the beginning had been pretty adamant that the iPhone did not need an app store. We consider the iPhone to be a kind of a closed ecosystem because third-party developers have to go through the App Store. Here at Mr. Mac, we like that because it is an extra layer of protection for our customers, that these apps that they're installing have been verified by Apple before being put on the App Store. So that generally helps keep them safe of things like malware. So that's great. But the original plan from Steve was to actually not even allow that all the apps would be downloaded directly from Apple and just set up with the apps that it comes with, like the first generation of the Apple TV still was, first 3 generations actually. And if you wanted to develop something directly for the iPhone, Steve Jobs' claim was that you didn't need to do it with the software development kit or an SDK provided by Apple, but instead you could write it directly into a website. Because Jobs initially believed that the standard of website building at the time, which was called Web 2.0 or AJAX, made all of anything you could dream that you wanted to code, you could do it directly on a web page, and then Apple would just use Safari to go and view your product. And that was the plan from the first day. That might be a good counterexample to one where Steve Jobs maybe was wrong, and his team, who apparently were lobbying very hard for the App Store, proved right. Because especially now, with the power of iOS and coding languages that have come for that to support that, like Swift, can far exceed the user experience that you might otherwise be able to have just by viewing a web page on Safari, even a really well-built web page. Okay, so where are we? Where does that leave us? The year is now 2011. We've gotten rid of Mobile Me. We have iCloud. We have our iPhone 4S, and we have pretty much the mail experience that we have all been enjoying for the last 14 years. You get your iPhone, you go to settings, you add a mail account, you plug in your Gmail username and password, and boom, you can read your emails as they're set up. Now, there is one experience that I personally was missing from the Mail app, and I'm going to say that this is true even more so for macOS because it's still not on macOS, and that is categories. Listen, if I just want to go and check my mail and see who's been emailing me, I open the Mail app. And when I say the Mail app, the Apple Mail app, whether it's macOS Mail or iOS Mail or iPadOS Mail, for me, it is the best, most enjoyable layout to digest emails. But it's not great for clearing out large amounts of emails unless you're doing them all. Because if you just want to get rid of all the junk, all the things that are just promotions, you can't really define that in Mac Mail. But what you can do, and this is what I would often do, is go to gmail.com and get out of the primary category and go over to the socials category, click the little checkbox to highlight everything in there, and boom, 200 emails gone. And then I would even take that a step further. Go over into the promotions or the updates category, select everything in there, maybe give it a quick scan to make sure there's nothing in there that I want to actually check out later, and deselect it, and then boom, another 200 emails gone. And then the primary, I can even go through a little bit quicker because it is a very thin, narrow line on gmail.com to give me a quick overview, select quite a few of them, boom, another 50 emails gone. Then I can go back to the mail app and do what I love to do, which is just interact and read and respond to the emails from that application. I didn't have that ability to do quick cleans from Mac or Apple's mail app. And because of that, it was really limiting on me getting through large amounts of emails to find the ones that were most important. And that's where we're going to end our show. Right after we have our field reporters talk a little bit more in depth about how all of this ties together.
Okay, so get this time, you all sent in like a ton of stuff about Apple.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff.
And it's not all sunshine and roses. We're going to dig into some of the things that maybe didn't quite go as planned back in the Steve Jobs days.
The missteps, yeah.
And then we're going to jump into all the recent chatter about their software, especially the AI stuff.
Like, is Siri actually going to catch up or what?
Exactly. So basically, we're going to try to figure out if this whole image of Jobs as a perfect tech genius, if that really holds up.
Yeah, man.
And what's actually going on with how people are experiencing the latest stuff, like, that redesigned mail app and all the talk about Siri updates or the lack thereof.
I'm really curious to see what the sources have to say.
Yeah.
You've got a good mix here.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Well, first, we've got that BGR article from 2016, right? The one looking back at what they consider Steve Jobs' biggest failures as CEO.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be interesting.
And then, to get a more current view, we've got a few things from March 2025. There's a transcript from Kurt the Cyber Guy's YouTube video where he's like breaking down the new Apple Mail categories in iOS 18.2.
Right, and a lot of people are not happy about those.
Yeah, we've got the standard article that goes into all the criticism about Apple not delivering on their AI promises and that whole Siri update delay.
Oof, yeah, that's been making headlines.
And going back a bit, we've got that iMore article from 2018, the one that analyzes that whole Mobile Me launch. That was a mess.
Mobile Me, oh, don't remind me.
And it also talks about the management culture at Apple under Jobs, which is, pretty relevant to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
And to round it all out, more from March 2025, we have that ZDNet article all about how users are unhappy with the iOS 18.2 mail redesign and how to go back to the old inbox.
That's what everyone wants to know, right?
Yeah. Right. And there's a super detailed Apple Insider piece on how to manage and even disable those new mail categories in 18.2. Then CNET has a nice summary of the mail changes and how to turn them off. And lastly, we've got a PDF that lays out all the new mail features in iOS 18.2.
So a lot of different angles on this.
This could be a good one.
Our mission here is to really dissect all of this, pull out the important stuff, and give you a much clearer picture of Apple's journey, right?
Absolutely.
The good, the bad, the ugly, the stumbles in the past, and the issues they're dealing with now, particularly with software and AI.
Yeah, how are they adapting?
And we want to get a feel for what it's actually like for you, the user, dealing with these latest mail app changes. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, real world impact.
So let's jump right into it. Let's go back to the early days under Steve Jobs and look at some of these so-called failures.
That's a loaded word.
I know, it feels almost wrong to even use that word with him, But this BGR article really challenges that idea of a perfect track record.
They're not pulling any punches.
Right. So what's your take on that? Even with someone like Jobs, there were bound to be some hiccups along the way, right?
Yeah, of course. And I mean, the article brings up some key examples where, his initial ideas or decisions, they didn't pan out. They had to be reversed or they flopped.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about his initial resistance to the App Store. I mean, can you even imagine the iPhone without it now? It's crazy.
It's hard to fathom, yeah.
But he was really against it at first.
Really? Why?
He thought Web 2.0 and AJAX apps running through Safari were all that developers needed. He even said, we have everything you need with these web standards. He really believed it.
Wow, so stubborn, right.
Yeah, but the article points out that it took a lot of internal pressure to get him to change his mind. Art Levinson, who was on the board, he kept bringing it up. And Phil Schiller, he was also pushing for it.
He was like, come on, Steve, we need this.
Exactly. Apparently, Jobs was worried about the resources it would take to manage third-party developers, making sure the apps were good quality and all that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it makes you wonder, was that the real reason? Was it just logistics? Or was there something deeper?
Oh, interesting. What do you think?
Maybe he was, afraid of losing control, you know? He had this very specific vision for the iPhone, and maybe he thought the App Store would, like, dilute that.
Yeah, mess it up.
Right. But in the end, the competition and just how much people wanted it, it forced a change.
They had to adapt.
The App Store launched in 2008, and it was like a game changer. It's a good lesson that even the strongest visions need to be flexible, you know?
Yeah, you gotta roll with the punches sometimes.
Especially when it comes to technology. Things change so fast.
Totally. So, moving on, let's talk about the iPod Hi-Fi. This was 2006, right?
Yeah, they launched it then.
Seemed like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
The iPod was so popular, and this was a speaker system specifically for it.
Like, why not, right?
Right. Exactly. But the BGR article calls it forgettable. And the main issue seems to be the price. It was $349.
Yeah, that was a lot back then,
Yeah,
especially for what it was.
right. And a lot of people felt the sound quality didn't justify that price.
Especially audiophiles, they weren't impressed.
What was Apple thinking, trying to sell it at that price point?
I mean, maybe they thought people would just pay anything for an Apple product, especially with the iPod's success, you know? Like, the brand association was so strong.
That halo effect.
Exactly.
Huh.
But, I mean, the market clearly disagreed.
They weren't buying it, literally.
It was discontinued quietly less than 2 years later.
Oh, wow. A total flop.
But here's the funny thing. The article mentions that unopened units are now selling for crazy prices online.
No way.
It's become a collector's item.
So even their failures can be valuable.
I guess so. It's kind of wild.
Okay, now for the big one. MobileMe. I bet just hearing that name brings back bad memories for some people.
Yeah, it was rough.
The BGR article is brutal. They call it a horror and say anyone complaining about iCloud now should be thankful they never had to deal with MobileMe.
I think a lot of people would agree with that.
It sounds like it was just a disaster from day one.
It was
They promised seamless email, device tracking, photo sharing, all that,
the whole package.
and it just didn't work. What were the main problems?
Well, I think it was a combination of things. They were too ambitious, for one.
Trying to do too much.
Right. And then there are all sorts of technical issues. It was slow, unreliable, data wouldn't sync properly. It was a
A
nightmare.
total mess.
The article even mentions how Steve Jobs reportedly flipped out after Walt Mossberg gave it a bad review.
Yeah, he was furious.
He told the engineering team they had tarnished Apple's reputation.
Oh.
And the fact that they disbanded the original team and put Eddie Q in charge of cloud services, it shows how seriously they took this failure.
It was a huge deal.
It was a clear case of, like, the execution just completely failing the vision.
They couldn't pull it off.
Not even close.
Okay, let's switch gears to hardware for a second. We can't forget about the infamous hockey puck mouse that came with the Bondi Blue iMac.
Oh, that thing?
The BGR article calls it one of Apple's strangest design decisions, and I think most people would agree.
Yeah, it was unique.
It was just so awkward to use.
It really was.
And Jobs initially loved it. He even said it was the best mouse you'll ever use.
Classic Jobs.
How did something so obviously flawed make it through the design process?
It's a good question. I mean, Apple is known for its design, right? But sometimes it feels like they prioritize form over function.
Yeah, style over substance.
Exactly. The hockey puck mouse might have looked cool, but it was terrible to actually use.
It was all about the aesthetics.
Right. And people just had to put up with it until they finally released the optical Apple Pro mouse.
Thank goodness for that.
It's a reminder that even the most influential figures can have blind spots when it comes to user experience.
Yeah, sometimes you got to listen to the people actually using the product.
Absolutely. User feedback is crucial.
Okay, last one from the Jobs era. The G4 Cube.
Now, this one is interesting.
Yeah, because the reviews were actually pretty good. People loved the design.
It was sleek, innovative, a real head-turner.
But there was one big problem. The price. It was $5,599.
Yeah, that was steep.
And that didn't even include a monitor.
So you're talking about a serious investment.
Was the technology inside really that groundbreaking? Or was it more about the design?
I think it was a combination of both.
Yeah.
The design was definitely a major selling point. It was cutting edge. But at that price, it appealed to a very niche market.
Yeah, only the hardcore Apple fans.
That shows that even a beautiful, technologically advanced product needs the right price point to be successful.
It's got to be accessible to people.
Exactly. You need that balance between design, technology, and affordability.
So looking back at all these examples, it's clear that even under Jobs, Apple had its share of missteps.
Yeah, no one's perfect.
And it's interesting because when we look at some of the challenges Apple is facing now, especially with software and AI, there are some parallels.
Definitely. History might be repeating itself.
Let's talk about the delayed Siri update and all those broken AI promises that the Standard article talked about. This was supposed to be a big upgrade,
It
right?
was supposed to be huge. They were going to release it with iOS 18.4, and it was going to be a totally new Siri. Smarter, more personalized, more like ChatGPT.
Basically, Siri was finally going to catch up.
That was the hope.
So what happened?
Well, there were apparently a lot of bugs, and there were internal concerns about whether it was actually ready.
So they delayed it.
Yeah, indefinitely. And people are not happy.
I bet. They've been waiting for this for a while.
The Standard article quotes John Gruber from Daring Fireball, and he's really laying into Apple. He says they're squandering credibility and even compares it to the Mobile Me disaster.
Wow, that's harsh.
He basically says Jobs would never have let this happen.
He's saying they've gone soft.
Kind of. And he's not the only one. There's that whole vaporware label going around on social media and Reddit.
Vaporware, ouch.
Yeah, it's not a good look.
And it's not just the Siri delay. Remember how Apple was hyping up Apple Intelligence with the new iPhones?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All those ads and marketing materials.
And then it turned out a lot of those AI features weren't actually available yet.
Yeah, they kind of jumped the gun on that one.
And they ended up having to pull some of that marketing. It's like, did they overpromise and underdeliver?
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And it's given their competitors a lot of ammunition.
But to be fair, Tim Cook did say that iPhone sales were good in regions where Apple Intelligence was available.
That's true. And they've been emphasizing privacy and the fact that it's still in beta.
And they've talked about what Apple Intelligence will eventually be able to do, like better writing tools, image generation, stuff like that.
Right. They're still painting a picture of a powerful AI future.
So is there still hope?
Maybe. But the Standard article also quotes analysts like Ming-Chi Kuo, and he's skeptical. He doesn't think Apple Intelligence is going to be a big driver for iPhone upgrades.
People don't care enough about it.
It seems like a lot of users aren't prioritizing AI features right now.
Interesting.
And Mark Gurman, he's warning that Apple is falling behind companies like Samsung and Google in the AI assistant race.
So the pressure is on.
Big time.
Okay, let's move on to the iOS 18.2 Mail app redesign. This is the one everyone's been talking about. And reading the user feedback, it kind of feels like Mobile Me all over again.
You're not wrong.
What's the main change?
They've added these automatic categories for emails: primary, transactions, updates, and promotions.
So your inbox is sorted for you.
In theory, it's supposed to help you manage your email better and find important messages faster.
But is it working?
Well, the ZDNet, Apple Insider, and CNET articles all say the same thing. Users hate it.
Really, what are they complaining about?
They say it's cluttered, it's hard to find specific emails, and it messes up their workflow. Basically, they don't like having their email sorted for them.
It's too much change.
And the sorting isn't always accurate. So important emails can end up in the wrong category.
So it's actually making things worse.
For some people, yeah.
Did Apple even test this properly?
It makes you wonder.
Well, the good news is you can switch back to the old view.
Yeah, you can go back to list view.
How do you do that?
Kurt, the cyber guy, shows you how in his YouTube video. You just tap the 3 dots in the top right corner of the inbox and choose list view.
So there's an escape hatch?
Exactly. You're not stuck with the categories.
That's good to know.
And the Apple Insider article goes into even more detail about managing the categories. You can switch between them at the top of the Mail app.
Okay, so you can customize it a bit.
Yeah. And you can actually recategorize senders in the transactions, updates, and promotions sections. You just swipe left on an email and choose categorize sender.
So you can teach it.
Sort of. But CNET points out that you can't recategorize emails in the primary category.
Why not?
I guess they see that as the most important category and want to make sure their algorithm is in control.
So they're taking away some control from the user.
It could be seen that way. But they do offer some other customization options, like you can completely turn off the categories, you can group emails by sender, and you can even disable the priority email feature if you have a device with Apple Intelligence.
So there is some flexibility.
Yeah, you can tweak it to fit your needs.
But at the end of the day, the PDF that describes the new mail features says the goal was to make email management easier. And for some people, it probably does.
Right, some people might love it.
But for a lot of people, it seems like it's just made things more complicated.
And that brings us back to the importance of user feedback. Apple needs to listen to what people are saying and make adjustments.
They can't just assume they know what's best for everyone. Okay, I want to go back to that iMore article for a second. It had that really interesting perspective from Erin Caton, who's actually on the MobileMe team.
Oh, right. She has some strong opinions.
She said the failure of MobileMe wasn't the engineer's fault. She blames the management culture at Apple under Steve Jobs.
That's a pretty bold statement.
She describes it as a culture of fear where people were afraid to speak up.
So no one was willing to say, hey, this isn't working.
Exactly. And she says that's why MobileMe ended up being such a mess.
Because they didn't catch the problems early enough.
And the engineers ended up taking the blame for it.
It's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
It shows how a company's culture can have a huge impact on its products.
And the iMore article then asks a really important question. Did Apple learn from MobileMe?
Right. Have things changed?
They point to other launches that weren't so smooth, like the first version of Siri and iOS 6 maps.
So that they're implying that maybe that culture of fear is still there.
It's a thought-provoking point.
It is.
So let's zoom out for a second. What are the key takeaways from all of this?
Well, first of all, even Steve Jobs, the legend himself, made mistakes.
He wasn't perfect.
We saw that with the App Store, the iPod Hi-Fi, MobileMe, the hockey puck mouse, the G4 Cube.
And don't forget about Eric Schmidt.
Oh, right. Jobs initially trusted him, even when Google, with Schmidt at the helm, became a direct competitor with Android.
It was like, dude, what are you doing?
And Jobs eventually realized that wasn't going to work. Schmidt resigned from Apple's board in 2009.
It shows how tricky those partnerships can be.
Especially in tech, where things move so fast.
And when we look at what's happening now with the Siri delay and the Mail app redesign, it feels like some of those same issues are popping up again.
That disconnect between what Apple thinks people want and what they actually want.
And maybe that same reluctance to listen to feedback.
It's a pattern worth paying attention to.
So for you listening out there, think about this in the context of your own Apple devices.
Yeah, how are these changes affecting you?
And remember, the tech landscape is constantly evolving. Apple is adding customization options to the Mail app, and they're still working on those AI features.
So who knows what the future holds?
Here's a final thought for you to chew on. If Apple wants to stay on top, do they need to change their approach?
Are they too stuck in their ways?
Is that culture of secrecy and control actually hurting them?
Or is their willingness to adapt, even if it means admitting they messed up, a sign of strength?
It's something to think about. The tech world is always changing, and the companies that can adapt will be the ones that survive.
And thrive.
Thank you to the field reporting on that excellent synopsis there. So what we have is an iPhone app that has been basically unchanged since its first success. MobileMe as a whole, not successful. Replaced within about 36 months. iCloud has been wildly successful, to include not just the services of iCloud, but also everything that comes with the basic iPhone download, with the basic iPhone iOS suite of apps, which we've all come to know and love, to include probably the biggest two out of the three, Photos and Mail. The third one, of course, iMessage. It can never do anything wrong. Every single upgrade has at least been an ad, even if you don't necessarily use your Animoji feature. So we have categories, but listen, guys, there's good news. If you want to turn it off, go into the mailbox that you don't like that feature on, click the three dots in the top right-hand corner, and then you're going to have two options. Either categories, which Apple has generously given us a shot at, okay, to be fair, and then list view, which is what we're all used to. Now, your categories will disappear as soon as you use it. You have a third option down there to learn about categories, in which case it'll clarify for you that primary is what Apple is saying matters the most to you based upon your interaction history and the content of the email as well, your transactions, your updates, and your promotions. There's, of course, one other little feature where a small symbol will show up to the left-hand side of the sender for verified senders. And that may look like a little house for a person, or maybe a small business building for a business that's sending you something. Or if you're a small business owner, let me clue you in real quick. If you go to Apple Business Connect, which is Apple's webpage for populating things like your business's exact location on Apple Maps, you can also determine what logo shows up when you send emails from your business to your customers. So if you want your logo to show up there, like we're seeing with Home Depot, for example, that's a great way to add even more validation and professionalism and security and really trust to your customers as they open up your email. So try it out on list view. Go back, see if the old category of no category is the way that you want to go, and or switch, because it's so easy, between that and categories plural, which will have your transactions, your updates, and your promotions as well. However it works best for you. The most important part of the Mr. Mac philosophy is take the time up front to customize it. Your workflow is your workflow. That's the thing that we help support, not overriding your workflow with something that we're completely sure is going to be totally better and get you confused, but rather think about the way that you want your devices set up and what is streamlined, and then invest the time into the settings with listening to podcasts like these that tell you where they are, and set it up so that it makes the most sense, so that your brain doesn't have to do the double work. But make sure that you're not just keeping yourself from learning about something that's new and more efficient. So you know how to switch it back. Top right-hand corner, circle 3 dots, and then switch it back and forth. Try it on 1 week on categories. Then go back to list view. See if you don't miss having all the transactions and promotions out of your primary and enjoying the one place where all your friends and family can keep in contact with you. Because that's what it's all about, staying connected with the people you love. All right, see you guys next week. Cue the music.